welcome back. Rich in Greenwood, Indiana, watching us on Free Speech TV. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Gentlemen, hello.
Hi there.
I wanted to offer a heads up on a news story and ask your opinion about this decriminalizing of domestic violence in Russia with what has been termed the slapping law. I got to see a short story on it over the weekend on, I guess it's Deutsche Welle from Berlin, and this administrative offense version of a response by the Russian government for a woman being brutalized by her spouse just seems outrageous. And the idea that a vulnerable segment of population is being permitted to be further preyed upon, just as gays are permitted to be preyed upon with, a blind eye by the government.
Particularly in Chechnya.
On Vice News yesterday. But tell me what you think.
Yeah, no, I mean, these are clearly outrageous behaviors, which is why we find it, I don't want to use the word ironic because it's not the right word, but why Donald Trump would be looking at these authoritarian leaders like Putin and in the Philippines as people that he looks as, it almost seems as like role models, when clearly the way they govern is not anything about this country's fundamentals and shouldn't be about the government fundamentals. So all the more reason why, we're trying to push back as these issues around Russia interfering with our elections and trying to make sure that we're trying to get the truth and finding out where the collusion was and maybe why some of these decisions are happening with the Trump administration in Russia. But, we should stand for the values that we've always had as a country. And clearly Donald Trump is out of step. And if what they're doing are the things like the health care bill and tax reform only for the most wealthy, all those things are out of step with what this country is about. And that's why we're pushing back.
Jose in Riverdale, Georgia, watching us on Free Speech TV. We've got a minute and a half, Jose. Quick question.
Okay. I live in Georgia now.
Oh, okay.
And
Georgia.
I'm down as a Democrat, but I don't see a big difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. And I really think that the Democrats are not trying to win. I mean, Ossoff did not try to win hard enough. I mean, he just came with a blah, 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 and he didn't do anything. Anyway, my question is, if politicians keep on lowering taxes, when will the point be reached when the taxes collected are not enough to run the government? Have we reached that point already? And if we have gone beyond that point, must the government function generating debt? Because if it does, we will reach a point where the federal government will have to close down permanently. I'd like to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jose, great point about, there's this, some folks on the center right of the Democratic Party are, just keep lowering taxes, right? Trying to out-Republican the Republicans on this. And eventually, if you have no revenue, you can't function as a government. The good news is the polls I've been seeing lately are people starting to have a renewed resurgence in faith in what the government needs to provide. I think this healthcare debates help that. They realize that under a proposal of taking away something like the Affordable Care Act, 23 million people could lose it. But part of that was from tax revenues that helped to pay for that, right? That was the $600 billion in tax cuts that they really were putting out there. So the good news is the people are ahead of the politicians on this. Again, if the people lead, eventually the leaders will follow. Just keep talking about this and keep working at it. We will win.
Congressman Mark Pocan in the studio taking your calls. Brad in Albuquerque, New Mexico, listening on 1350 AM there in Albuquerque. Hey, Brad, you're on the air.
Thank you, Tom and Congressman Pocan. My question, due to the frustration a lot of us voters have with Georgia 6, is why doesn't the Democratic Party or Ossoff make a legal challenge to what took place, since he has standing and we have all of that information from Greg Palast and all the behaviors of Handel during her time as Attorney General, as we talked about earlier on the show, with all of the different obstructions to voting. Why can't this be the initial challenge that makes cross-check illegal? Because they really aren't identifying people well enough to knock them off the voting roll. And the other part of the question is, why didn't Obama and Lynch really do anything? Because all of this voter suppression has been taking place for 10 years more. I don't know. But it's kind of frustrating that some of this doesn't more aggressively get challenged.
Yeah.
And thank you.
And a lot of this came out of ALEC.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
You blew the lid off on.
Yeah, I used to be a member so I could give every progressive group in Washington the password so they could download their model legislation. Brad, let me say this. Let me take it a little bit at a 30,000-foot level if I can. There's a lot of attacks on voting rights. Part of it is because you don't technically, or officially, I should say, not technically, have a constitutional right, which would be the highest right in the land. You have to prove you've been harmed, which is a very difficult bar in a court to do. Part of why Keith Ellison and I have introduced a constitutional amendment to guarantee a right to vote is to do just that. Because then if we had a constitutional right, any state that changes the law would have to prove they haven't hurt your right to vote, as opposed to right now, you got to prove you've been harmed, and it would change the burden completely. We wouldn't be in whack-a-mole mode of every state trying to fight the changes they're doing. So, I would argue let's look at this in a bigger, grander picture. It's very difficult to beat these in the court system right now, which is I think why you don't see a lot of the court cases. But we need to make sure that we have that highest level right possible. And I think this is something that as we're fighting individual laws in states, we need to get to the very top, which is our constitutional right. That would be the best provision you could have.
CJ in Titusville, Florida. You are on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Yes, Congressman. I see the Republicans always go for the jugular in every election. They're vicious, they're mean, and they lie. Democrats seem to bring a spoon to these knife fights. My question is this: why can't the states controlled by Democrat governors and secretaries of state do exactly the same thing? That is the same sort of cross-check. I mean, we have to fight fire with fire. These people don't play fair. I'm really concerned that 2018, if that is not a tsunami turnaround, we've basically lost our democracy.
So, CJ, first of all, I don't think anyone's proposing that we knock off a different type of voter, because that doesn't help, right? In a democracy,
let's go after white people.
Right, we can't. It's just not. It's bad, period. But I would argue, we just need to do everything we can to get out voters. We know that people agree with us on the issues. They share our values more than they share with Republicans. So we have to make sure that we don't have happen what happened in 2016, where in Wisconsin, 200,000 fewer Democrats came out to vote. And that means Hillary Clinton lost by 22,000 votes. And Russ Feingold, who was a great U.S. Senator, previous U.S. Senator, didn't win because of such a big drop-off of Democratic votes. So I don't think we want to take away other people's ability to vote. I don't know if that's quite the answer, but I do think we've got to fight for everyone's right and get people out to vote. That's why they do these laws. They know people agree with us. They usually have the money. We have the people and the issues. We have to make sure that that is stronger than the money they usually have.
Dan, listening on KBCS in Seattle, Washington. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning. I missed part of the talk, but I'd like to know what the Democratic Party is doing in terms of challenging the voter suppression laws in other states. And two, from my experience being a PCO, I've noticed that the Democratic Party really doesn't want to get people out to vote. They don't want to go on they don't want to really target the areas where there's high Democratic potential and low turnout. I worked with a very prominent person here, and his staff never wanted to touch it. Now, I don't know if this is just an old thing that happened 10 years ago and everything's changed, but I'd like to get your opinion on how we really get that door-to-door to work on a sustained level. I'll hang up. Thank you.
Sure. Dan, so I do think you might be looking at a unique situation in your area. Generally, I know from what I've watched in Wisconsin and other places, there's an attempt to get out every single vote. So there's not some people they don't want to get out. However, I think what's a fair argument is often the the so-called consultants want you to buy more and more TV because they get a cut of that, as opposed to putting money on the ground game, putting more people knocking on doors, more community organizers working with community groups to give people a reason to go out and vote. So I would argue maybe there's a shift of where our emphasis needs to be, and it should really be on getting out the vote as opposed to just another 30-second commercial that says nothing. But I don't think there's anywhere I've seen where you're not trying to get out the vote. So a priority could shift, but I don't see that as a reality.
Zeta or Zata? Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name. Zeta?
Zeta.
Zeta in Frewsburg, New York. You are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you. Actually, I'm living in Bradenton, Florida right now.
Oh, my. Okay.
I'm calling. Other people have broached on this subject, but I've been a Democrat all my life. I'm 84, and I'm very disappointed in the Democratic National Committee. Now, you Congressman Pocan, you said that they're not very busy with the special elections, but I feel that if they had really fought for the Kansas candidate and the South Carolinian candidate, that we would have won those two seats. And I think the Democrats are making a big mistake in just assuming because they're red districts that they're not going to win. There's so much enthusiasm now with the resist movement, like Congressman Pocan said about the 6,000 indivisible groups, of which I am one of them. Why aren't the Democrats more? Why aren't they funding the ones that are in these elections, even if they're in red districts?
Yeah. So, often, let's explain, the campaign itself is what is the lead in any district. That's what runs the race, right? And then they have outside partners. The DNC, just so people understand, often I think the DNC gets unfairly blamed because they don't necessarily run a race. They could certainly provide assistance, but it's that candidate's campaign running the race. Most of the money raised was by John Ossoff's campaign and then other outside groups doing things. So that's why I said I don't blame the DNC directly for it. However, I know just from this morning a meeting that we were involved in South Carolina to the level that people wanted us. And if you look, the turnout was significantly less because if we had been more visible in some ways, then the Republicans would have been more visible and you would have started to crank up that fight. So I don't think that the races were ignored. They were done as the campaign wanted in those areas. But again, I want to go back to these are races that were so far so Republican districts that they're not the most likely prospects. And while we got so close, what that tells me is even though you only had like 80,000 people voting or 90,000 in South Carolina compared to several 100,000 in Georgia, that's part of why, the closeness mattered when you talk about these races. We just have to make sure that we're running on the values and running aggressively in the districts where we can win in 2018. And like I said, the Republicans themselves admitted 71 seats. We need 24. This is possible. Don't let this one race in Georgia or the other races determine where we're going. I think when you have 15, 20-point shifts in electorate, that is a message in and of itself. But it was unlikely we were going to win any of these races to begin with. And I think that's just being very pragmatic at looking at the reality of how elections are, and gerrymandering has made these districts.
Yeah. We have a little less than a minute. Your thoughts for the coming week? What should people be looking for, paying attention to?
Republican healthcare proposal. What the Senate's going to do is going to be really, really important to watch, because if they come out with another bad proposal and then it comes over to the House, or they get to then find the differences between the two bills, you're going to have something that I'm still thinking you're going to be close to, a couple tens of millions of people losing health insurance. This is going to be devastating to real people. And we have to do everything we can to contact Senate offices now to make sure that they are less inclined to go down that path.
Right, and the number is 202-224-3121 to reach your senator. Just tell them what state you live in if you're not sure who your senators are. But unless you live in the district, you've got two of them. Yep. Congressman Mark Pocan, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Appreciate it.
And you can tweet Congressman Pocan at Rep. Mark Pocan, and his website is pocan.house.gov. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.